appreciate you taking the time to join this Masterclass series on planning for overstretched business teams. Here is our agenda for today. We'll go through some introductions. There are three of us presenting today. We're going to go through the trends, as I mentioned, that we see in the marketplace now, and talk about those trends on certain areas of your firm, risk, finance, and IT. Really where we're seeing constraints on the business systems teams, what are some of the demands that are being asked of your teams, and where are you finding those challenges, sort of hitting your teams, and what can you do to help stretch across those? And we've got some solutions, suggestions for resourcing where we've seen a variety of resource constraints and ideas and solutions, some tips and tools of the technologies that are available, and some processes that also could help improve your ways of working. Then we'll go over some of the key takeaways and, of course, have time for our Q&A. For those of you that don't know us, we are three members of the pinnacle-oa.com. I say that, so that's our website. Our Pinnacle consulting team is made up, for today's discussion, is made up of Tony Pullman, who's based in the UK. He's the COO and co-head of our managed service offering. I'm Val Reese, and I am the COO of our North America team, and Gareth Thomas is our head of global sales. Collectively, we've got 75 years of experience in the legal industry. That sounds really odd to say, but in an earlier discussion, we realized we all have been doing this for about 25 years. So we're excited to be chatting with you today, and hopefully we are sharing some good knowledge with you and something that will be useful. Just a little bit of an introduction to Pinnacle in case you don't know who we are. We are really a business made of three major pinnacles, three major points of those. We've got consulting and implementation, where we work with a lot of law firms on implementations of software. It might be one of our products that we're implementing for a finance team or a business development team or the risk team. We've worked with a lot of Thomson Reuters and Elite clients. We've worked with a lot of Intapp partners on implementing those software solutions. We also have a data insights team, which is working with our business intelligence team, going through a lot of analytical and dashboarding tools for displaying data. And additionally, we've got our managed service team, which will support all of the applications that you see on the screen. Our goal there is really just to work with your teams to supplement your own internal IT teams. We've got a managed service team that scales up or scales down according to whatever the firm is in need of. And additionally, our third piece is a software development arm, where we've developed some software that really we found in our many years of working with law firms across the world, that we've noticed that there are some key areas where really software that is designed to work with the solutions that we implement, and designed to address the actual issues or some of the challenges that firms are having are, really where we want to focus our time in our development arm. So we've got a data quality monitor, which really will just help highlight any issues so that you can address them and potentially remove those as issues going forward. Pitch Perfect for the business development teams out there, and a great pitch proposal tool, and some other useful tools for managing your finance and systems teams. So without further ado, we'll go into some of the products that we work with. Many of these that you see on the screen are actually our partners, and this is just a representation of some of the software that we work with on a very regular basis. So I'd like to pass on the baton to my colleague Gareth, who will go through some of the trends that he has seen working with many of our clients over the last many years.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Val. I can actually see we've already got a question. Rather than picking it up on the fly, what we'll probably do is stop after before the wrap up. We'll try and sort of address all the questions then. So it'll probably be in about sort of 20-30 minutes from now that we'll start to address the questions. But as Val said, yeah, we've been having lots of conversations with our clients at the moment around how they're resourcing teams, what are the challenges that they're starting to see. And I think if we could go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. Thank you. So yeah, and look, the general feedback coming from the market, whether it be US, UK or European or indeed Asia Pac firms, because we have clients everywhere, the general feedback is that recruitment costs have gone up. The available pool of talent that you are able to recruit from is getting thinner and smaller. And that actually a lot of the specialist skills that you need to do a lot of the one-off functions in your business support teams is just getting much, much harder to find. So now added to that sort of general skills shortage and increase in recruitment costs, you've got the whole sort of Gen Y millennial approach to what's important to them. So be that financial, the location of where they work, the importance of company values that their employers have and that they share the same values as their employers, along with things like environmental goals, creativity and collaboration, actually rank higher than things like pay and job title, which was certainly not the case if you go back 15, 20 years. This data has come from a recent Michael Page survey that we had access to. So I'd say sort of COVID, the reality that the physical location is no longer considered to be a primary factor in where someone or who someone works for, really means that the size and the makeup is really starting to change quite dramatically within the business system support teams within law firms. What we've also noticed in our discussions recently as well is that actually the role within the law firm brings with it different challenges. So what I'd like to do over the next few slides is talk about some of the different issues and challenges that we're getting back from primarily the three key areas we spoke to are the three key areas we tend to work in, which is risk, finance, and technology. So if we kick things off and look at risk then, there's certainly a perception that there's a shortage of qualified, experienced risk professionals within the legal market in general. Okay, and due to this lack of lack of availability for the specialist skills you need within the risk function, this is now starting to have an impact on clients in terms of their whole onboarding process. So the knock-on effects of a lack of sort of availability within the risk area is going to be things like slower onboarding of clients, the slower opening of new matters. Ultimately, this then has the knock-on effect of not being able to record time. And then ultimately bills go out slower, cash gets collected quicker. So I'm not saying it's all complete doom and gloom, but certainly when we talk to GCs and heads of risk and intake and conflicts, they say that getting good risk people now is harder than it's ever been before. Now, allied to the lack of availability of good risk professionals, we've got issues or new challenges around things like regulations. So DAC 6, which has with it, an unavoidable short-term challenge around ensuring compliance for cross-border tax, which a lot of you with international offices will absolutely be facing, plus changes in AML regulations, be that domestically or internationally. I've been having a lot of conversations with European firms now who are now just starting to see the challenges that we've had in the UK and the US. It's now starting to creep into mainland Europe, and quite often the AML considerations and things you have to comply with will be very different region by region. So again, if you're an international firm, you have to have a very different approach to AML depending on where the clients are that you're actually bringing on board. Now, there are ways you can address this through smarter resourcing and better use of technology, and Tony's going to come and talk about some of this shortly. But A third area that's really posing problems for risk professionals at the moment that we're talking to is around changes in firm structure. So most notably here is the increase in varines and mergers. So depending on the type of varine that you could be as a law firm, you have challenges and restrictions around who can access what data from where and when. So that's sort of challenge number one. And the second challenge we're seeing around changes in firm structure is relations to mergers. So when firms are going through mergers, there are certain restrictions about who can and can't access what information pre compared to post merger. So we've done a lot of work, which was sort of relatively new to us at the time, around how we can help firms who are merging, because we're able to have access to two sets of data when they can't see each other's data. So we've seen that as quite a big challenge with some firms we've worked with on the merger front recently, where we've been able to sort of step in the middle and provide similar services to the two, which has proven really good and allowed them to get over these sort of people challenges and data access challenges that they had. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So the second audience that we've been having some quite detailed discussions with around their challenges are finance. So it's probably fair to say that in terms of law firm technology upgrades, the upgrade to the finance management system is invariably the most expensive, the most time consuming, the most complicated. It's rarely perceived by the end users, i.e. the lawyers, to ever give them any benefits at all. And as such, it's probably the one enterprise-wide system that gets upgraded as less frequently as possible, unless it's been driven by a major event, such as a merger perhaps, or something on the infrastructure side is going out of support. You know, I was actually talking to a firm recently where they had to upgrade their FMS because it was supported by SQL 2012, which was no longer being supported. So now, interestingly, in the survey that we provided to you all before, the challenge of completing upgrades and doing so in a timely manner was actually second in terms of your responses around which aspect of system maintenance and improvement is your biggest challenge. So the fact we're hearing this from a lot of heads of finance and CFOs and finance directors actually was mirrored by the contribution that you guys very kindly gave to the survey before today. And then what we see once law firms do finally get around to upgrading their FMS is that actually a number of environmental and integration challenges happen quite quickly. So here we see integrations and environmental sort of performance drop off potentially quite quickly, sometimes after major FMS upgrades. And actually, interestingly, in the survey, maintaining integrations and custom development ranked actually as #1 in the challenges that you're all seeing. Now, whilst there are certain challenges that the finance leaders are telling us about in terms of both upgrades, the perceived benefit they get back from the lawyers, and then in environmental and integration challenges that they see shortly after, actually, if you think about it, the net effect of efficiency gains for this particular audience is potentially huge. So the ability to get out things like global client and matter billing, compliance with outside counsel guidelines, faster cash collection, etc., would typically lead to an increase in revenue and profit for the firms. So whilst there are some significant challenges for the finance audience and community within law firms about how they structure their teams and how they get them to perform and support the firm, actually the benefits that they have are probably from a sort of tangibility perspective bigger than any of the other support functions. If we go to the next slide as well, please. So we also do a lot of work with the technology audiences. So there are sort of 3 key areas that have jumped out from our discussions that they're finding challenging at the moment. So the first one is around cloud. So moving to the cloud requires quite specialist knowledge that actually, once you've made the transition to the cloud, you don't necessarily need that skill set in-house full-time moving forward. And the ability to redeploy this very specialist skill elsewhere is in itself a challenge. So a lot of the firms we've spoken to have said, well, look, we'd rather work with external vendors on the migration, get it done once. You're only ever going to move your document management system to the cloud once, or your CRM system or your finance system. Then one of the second major challenges that finance leaders are telling us about is around a real lack of understanding, a lack of standardization on integration platforms within their firms. So by having lots of different integration technologies, the first casualty of this area is quite often the data. And then once your clients, i.e. the lawyers, go to access this data, if there are consistency issues across data, then straight away, there's going to be a sort of lack of trust of the data that you're giving them. Now, most law firms on average, based on our conversations, have at least 3 different integration technologies, which actually, if you think about it, is crazy. Although we are seeing now with law firms doing much more within the Microsoft platform, that Azure integration services is becoming much more prevalent. Working with partners like Intap, who do a lot to promote Boomi, we are starting to see a bit of standardization here. But certainly the number of different integration technologies that law firms typically have is driving real challenges around consistency and quality of data. And then the sort of third headline area that we've heard from law firms, technology teams, is really all around interoperability. So everyone's talked about interoperability for a number of years. Obviously, it makes sense. The ability for all of your systems to work together as seamlessly as possible is very important. But getting good integration and interoperability skills within your technology team is quite difficult, because there aren't that many firms that have done a really good job of doing this before. So where do you go to get this experience? Now, typically firms we're talking to at the moment are either having to come to specialist vendors, or they're looking outside of the legal sector to find these skill sets to bring them in, because I think it's fair to say adjacent professional services such as accounting or consultancy have actually done quite a bit more than the traditional law firm has around getting all their systems to speak to each other. So I wanted to touch just briefly there on some of the challenges that we're hearing from our clients, which I've tried to sort of break down by the different specific roles. But what I'd like to do now is hand over to Tony, who's going to talk through actually how some of our clients are addressing these challenges that they'd identified, and also how Pinnacle can help you in this area.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gareth, and good morning / good afternoon to everybody who's joined us. It's really good to see so many people on the call today. One of the things that I do in my role day to day is talk to the clients that we work with, a bit like Gareth, but in a slightly different context, in that we are providing them with a managed service, which effectively gives them a bit of bandwidth in terms of how they support and maintain their systems. And a lot of the things I'm about to talk about have come from conversations and experience from those individuals. So one of the things I'm very conscious about on this call is we've got a real variety of system types that people are looking after. So I've tried to be quite general. We've got people looking after finance systems, CRM systems, DMS systems, risk systems, a real array of different types of systems. So I'm not going to be specific. I'm going to be a bit more generic in terms of how we talk about those. But I think as I was thinking about this topic and chatting to clients, what I realized was there's absolute consistency across this. And the words you see on the screen really are from our client's mouth. So you've got basically a slide there that talks about what fits around you as a business systems team in terms of your constraints. And on the very far outside of the circle, you've got all the requirements and demands that they're having to fulfill at the moment. You know, we've talked everything there about, you know, we have to deal with BAU issues, day-to-day keeping the system running. We've got to keep the system maintenance intact. In addition, you're being asked to make continuous improvements to the system, as well as keep the lights on. You're also being asked to run sizable projects, be the upgrade projects. So you've got all these pressures on the outside. And we've talked a little bit about the move to the cloud as well. Our clients are in different levels of maturity in all of these things and in terms of how they're addressing them. And the people that we think are the most mature here are thinking about these on a regular basis and addressing them in quite sensible and practical ways that I'd like to get to on the next few slides. Just having a look in the blue circle in the middle, you can see the number of constraints that I think you've all identified through the survey that we put forward. Most of these are very common, and sadly, they are experienced everywhere. So don't panic. You're not alone if you're seeing and you're thinking to yourself, how can I deal with these? It's absolutely consistent across the market, and it's consistent because our firms are under pressure from their clients, so therefore we're under pressure from our firms to actually deliver against all of these. And there are a number of challenges in each of these different areas, from that be cost, capacity, resourcing, as Gareth talked about. The scarcity in the market at the moment is significant in terms of quality resource, the time to get things done, the expectations from the business, all of that good stuff. So in the next few slides, if we just move on, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some practical areas that I think we can focus on, and how firms are addressing those challenges. And before I do that, I'd like to just throw a few questions back at you and just get you thinking a little bit. I'm not going to ask you to answer these on the call, but I think what might be quite useful is if you just have a sit and think for a second, and you may be absolutely in perfect position to answer these and have all the right answers. But I'd suggest some of the questions here might help you think strategically about how you need to reconfigure your systems, but actually the teams look after them, which is what today's topic is all about. So what are the biggest challenges your business systems teams are facing from the business? Is it pressure from their clients in terms of what they're asking for? Is it the fact that you've got too much to do in terms of business as usual versus actually trying to get the system continuously improved? Is it that you've got upgrades on the horizon? Is it this? Is it that? There's a whole host of things. So have a think about those. The second question really fits into that. Is your team aligned to meet those business needs and that strategy? And what are the priorities? A lot of the people that I work with don't have any help with answering that. They're not at the table when they understand what the business really needs, and therefore they don't set any priorities or able to set any priorities. It's a real challenge for them. Are your teams structured effectively to meet the needs of the business? Have you got, for example, the same people sitting there firefighting the day-to-day issues? Are they the same people who are expected to make small changes? Are they the same people who are expected to be, upgrading the system, doing new projects elements to it? Common challenge is that people don't structure their teams and think about what it is they want their internal people to do and how that's prioritized. It sounds really simple, but it's just such a common theme. I'd like you to have a think about it. And are your folks working at an optimal level? Are you actually delivering for the business, and how are you measuring that in a way that you can meaningfully have a conversation with the business to say, actually, here's the level we're performing and here's how we're measuring that. Again, a lot of folks don't have time to do that, but I would urge you to think about that. The next stage is around education and training. I would guess that a lot of you are sitting and you are supporting a number of different end user bases. So first of all, are you educating your end users? Are you working closely with your end users? And secondly, are you educating and training on a regular basis your own team people who are actually supporting these systems? It doesn't happen a lot. I'll talk in a second around support levels. And I know support isn't everything around what you guys are doing. You're doing a whole host of stuff. But from a support perspective, I talk to clients who say, yeah, we offer level 1, 2, 3, 4 support, and we do it this way with these sort of people. Often I ask them, are you actually providing any level 0 support in terms of actually any self-help type work, anything that people can educate themselves on, in terms of having change champions in the business? Is there any other support framework that you've got in place that actually helps before they even get to you guys? And the answer very often is no, because there isn't time to do that. But actually thinking about that, putting in place, is quite significant. We talked a lot here about upgrade strategy and actually how we manage it. If you just flip back a second for me, Charlotte, please. So upgrade strategy is really important. Have you got that clear in your minds and in the business's minds in terms of how you're going to actually deal with upgrades? And then finally, if you've got a service framework in place, it may be that you're not mature enough to have a big beast of a service framework like ITIL, but actually having some sort of framework in place will make a significant difference in terms of the way that you can optimize your levels of service. Okay, let's flick on to the next one. So that's all great. The way I thought about this was probably in a more simplistic approach. If my team is sitting in the center there as an application support service team, I've probably got 4 very large buckets of areas that I need to worry about on a regular basis. Some of these may be appropriate to you, all of them may be, okay? So issue resolution, the ability to optimize the system, the ability to monitor and maintain the system, and then the ability to upgrade it and continually improve it. And across that spectrum and that framework, I thought about this in terms of the classic kind of people, process and tools type approach. So resourcing, the tools and tech that you can put in place, and then the process that you might look to adopt. So that's what I'd like to do now, is dive into each of those 3 core areas and just pull out some things that I think are really relevant for this session today. Okay, so if we look at resourcing, talked a little bit about some of these, but having one team to address all of those areas is going to ultimately create a bottleneck, and you're just not going to be, it's not a sustainable approach. Having different people looking at different roles and responsibilities, or in different roles and responsibilities, is crucial. And having the bandwidth to be able to go to different groups to get the right things is crucial. So if you've got your same folks doing BAU as they're doing continuous improvement and project work, then I would suggest you're in trouble unless you've got a very small number of those to deal with. The approach we see out of the market is that we're actually, firms that are really successful are deciding what they want their internal teams to focus on. What is it they're good at, and where do they add their most value? And then outside of that, where do we go to get the rest of the stuff? Is that a third party? Is that an external resource? Is it somebody else in the business? But you need to think about that tier structure in terms of how you resource this. Otherwise, actually, you're just going to be a continual bottleneck. And one person, two people, three people, whoever you have in your team, won't have the breadth of skill set to manage all of those areas. It's as simple as that. And we see firms, teams really struggling with this because they maybe don't have the budget, they maybe don't have the time. But unless you think about that and you're able to have a conversation at the table with your bosses and have that say about what it is you want to structure your team, then you will always be fighting fires, would be my opinion. Ongoing education, we've talked a lot about that. We have worked with a lot of clients who don't educate their internal teams a lot, and they're losing people because of it. Not only are they stretched, but they're not being given the time to continually improve their own performance by being educated. And they're also not educating their end users or spending enough time with their end users to see where the problem points are and things can be fixed at the source rather than when it gets to you guys. A lot of issues we see around business process reviews not being done on a regular basis. A system was put in place. It was inefficient at the time and it hasn't moved on. So those inefficiencies are just perpetuated and they keep coming through to your teams, and you see the same issues over and over again. They could be process issues, they could be data issues, and I'll come on to that a little bit. Gareth's talked about upgrades. This area fascinates me. I've worked in the legal industry a long time, and I've seen people sitting at the budget table, refusing to take upgrades for 2-3+ years and staying behind. It's a false economy. If you guys don't spread the cost over a sensible time frame and you're continually investing in your upgrade strategy, doing one big upgrade is an absolute false economy. You end up spending a lot more time on it, a lot more effort. You probably end up putting a lot of capex into resource just to solve that issue. It's a short-term fix, and it's actually a very costly fix to do that. If you spread your cost over a period of time and amortize that cost, then you'll be in a much better place and you can keep on top of things. A lot of people don't even have a strategy laid out that they understand and the business understands as well. So you can't work on that collectively as a collective team. Systems monitoring and maintenance, people just don't have tools in place. So they're constantly fighting the same fires, the same data issues are coming up and we're solving them when they come through rather than going back and finding where they came from as a root cause and dealing with them back there. They don't have data monitoring tools in place. They don't have a systems maintenance program in place. So all of these things are areas where you need to focus and take a step back and think about how you structure and what sort of tools and techniques you've got in place. The final one I think is really interesting as well from a business perspective. Have you got an established product owner in place? If not, my suggestion would be you need one. Somebody in the business who's really got responsibility for the systems that you're helping support, maintain and monitor and actively improve. Okay, can you move that one on for me, Charlotte, please? Thank you. Tools and tech, we've talked a little bit about this. One of the big issues at the moment is that we're working with clients who have business intelligence tools that sit across probably many of the systems that you're looking at, or reporting tools that sit across them. And they rely on the quality of data, not just in the siloed systems, but as Gareth talked about, that interoperability across the different systems, maybe across your risk systems, into your finance systems, CRM, into your DMS. Having tools that are able to proactively find those issues and solve them at the root cause, rather than just dealing with the symptom all the time, is crucial. So looking into that and being able to do that. We talked about proactive maintenance schedules, also support systems and support services framework. This idea that you understand what your service level agreements are, you understand what levels of support, who's providing each levels of those support, who has responsibility. The more you have that in place, the more you can communicate that to the business and actually have regular ongoing conversations around whether you're meeting those and whether you're being successful, or where you need help, or where your bandwidth is needed, where you're really struggling. You can almost leverage that as a tool to say, hang on a second, we're not meeting where we need to be. Governance and ways of working almost really falls off that in many ways. Having responsibilities, roles within your team, ways of working, structure, reporting, all of that really fits in. And we don't see this consistently across teams. We see firefighting, we see them working in their little groups. We don't see them involving the business. We don't see them with a set governance in place to do that. And then the final one in here is really important. Somebody's asked about AI solutions, and they've talked about, that almost fits into a category of automation for me. You can keep supporting systems over and over again, but if you don't go back and work with the business about where you can automate elements, where you can change and you can increase efficiencies, you're forever going to be dealing with the same issues. There are lots of ways you can put automation into your service, into your support, but actually into the way that your folks are working at the front end. And without doing that, without understanding that analysis, understanding the business process they're going through, where you can automate, you're never going to move forwards. So that carving out that time to do that, working with the right partners potentially, or the right people internally to have that conversation and to go through that, is absolutely crucial. So, okay, Charlotte. And from a process perspective, similar themes here again. One of the things we find is we work with clients who, let's say, they've put in a finance management system a couple of years ago, and it was fine for the time. It was designed at the time. It wasn't perfect. We got it in. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when it went in. And 2 years, 3 years later, we're still supporting the same system, but we're still supporting the same problems that we had. And we haven't really analyzed whether we need to actually improve our business processes and the way that we're working. Taking a step back on a regular basis, analyzing your business processes, might be with a vendor, might be with a third party like ourselves, spending time understanding what's happening in the market as best practice so you can improve those things, ultimately has a positive effect in terms of the way that your teams are supporting and enhancing the system. If you don't do that, we never move forward. Also taking time to assess the tools in the market that help you move forward. The same problems, are you actually spending time with your business partners, your product owners, having that conversation around where are the issues, and actually, should we actually think about different products that can solve our problems? And looking for those efficiency gains almost comes from a lot of the things that I've really talked about. We've mentioned cloud. A lot of people are embracing cloud or thinking about cloud, and there's different levels of maturity in terms of where people are on that path. Lots of DMSs are in the cloud, lots of CRM in the cloud. Finance management systems, there's a little bit of a lag in terms of where people are. They want to get there, or they think they do, but they're worried about it because they've got heavily customized systems. They've got challenges that they know are going to make it really hard to get from where you are now to get to the cloud solution. Our opinion here is that you should be proactive about getting yourself ready for that journey to the cloud. You should be thinking about, how do we cut down on those customizations? Can we move to the next upgrade, the next version of the product, which actually helps us get there because it's actually got built-in elements to it that makes that jump to the cloud easier. Having that proactive conversation internally and with your partners and with vendors to see how you can do that is absolutely crucial, because you can pave your way over the next coming years to get to that end goal. It's really important. But thinking about it in 2 years' time is no good. You need to start thinking about it now. Have to have that conversation so you can incrementally build that activity into your strategy. Okay, move on, Charlotte. So just wrapping up, I've talked a lot about the people, the process, and the technology. And a lot of it we know about. We know it's there, but it's taking time to think about it and formulate a strategy around it. It's thinking about, how is your resourcing model meeting the business need? Have you got the depth and breadth? Have you got your people internally focused on the right things? And are they happy as a consequence, or are they too overstretched? The reality is, I suspect they're overstretched, because you've all told us on your survey they haven't got enough time, you haven't got enough capacity, you've got issues in terms of putting bug fixes in. It's a real challenge. You've got to build out the right model in terms of focus, priorities, and give yourself some bandwidth in that area. And it's one thing that's been really successful for us when we work with clients, is giving people that specialist subject matter expertise at the time when they need it, so they can cherry pick it rather than having to spend a lot of money on internal resource. Tools and techniques and technology, particularly to practically solve those issues before they hit them. Data. Are you seeing a lot of data issues in your system? Can you, for example, be looking at data monitoring tools that help actually solve those problems proactively rather than waiting for them to hit the end user? And then reviewing and improving process, both at a system level, but also at a people level. I'd really urge you to think about education, process reviews, all of those obvious things that we know need to be done. Take a step back and strategically plan those over the coming months, because that'll make such a difference in the way that you are able to produce a continuous improvement program and take the weight off the BAU and actually move your business forward with the systems that they've got. And hopefully by doing that, you start to see the return on investment that you've probably envisaged some time ago really coming into fruition. But if you don't, and you're forever reactive, and you don't build out structure, process, and people, then you're going to be in trouble. So just 3 key areas to really think about. Hopefully that's been helpful, but it covers quite a lot of ground.
It does cover a lot of ground. Thank you, Tony. So just some of the key takeaways and our closing thoughts here. The resourcing, obviously, a big concern for everybody that's participating today. hiring and retention, I think, is a challenge across the board in law firms, not just within the technology sector, but we're seeing that, you know, with the legal teams, the secretarial teams or PA teams. It's, you know, it's not unique, and it's definitely something to consider. So what works for the roles that you're hiring, you know, and the answer is going to be different for each firm, I'm sure. But those themes that we talked about earlier are probably some good starting points for you to discuss internally. And what's the reasonability of upskilling the folks that are on your team with all of the software changes that come through on a regular basis, added technologies, all of the ways that we work changing, you know, keeping up with all of that can be a very daunting task. There are many people who love the constant change and are very keen to stay on, you know, top of tree and know the latest and greatest enhancements that have been offered by a particular software vendor. But the reasonability of keeping up with that is something that we find to be a challenge. Then scaling to meet the demand of what's happening in the firm and in terms of maybe special projects or client demand while you're doing your day-to-day job. You know, those are probably age-old problems, but they get more pronounced when you are in the technology area and there are these major leaps and changes that occur so rapidly in our sector. Bring in the expertise that's needed when it's needed, I think, is a good way to approach some of this. You aren't necessarily going to have a bench full of the most skilled folks in the deepest areas of all the software that you support, but you can bring in those folks that have the expertise, and you can use them and deploy them as you need them, and then allow them to, you know, return to another client. It is the absolute benefit to being able to hire vendors and partners, technology partners to work with. The benefit to the firm is that, one, they're not part of your FTE. You don't have to go and figure out what to do with them after that big project is done, or after that that one particular change that needed to happen is completed. Use the bandwidth of the technology teams that are around you, potentially outside of your firm. Or consider a mix of both. You're going to have folks who know your firm, know it well, know the ins and outs. Get them working with your technology vendors who can help you with that scalability and the fluctuation in need. Keeping current with upgrades and compliant with whatever your maintenance agreement is a huge recommendation. We want you to stay friendly with your vendors. Vendors, we know, sometimes will put down a little bit of a hammer when you aren't compliant and you're on very old versions. They'll say they can't support you, or, you know, they can't offer any guidance on an enhancement in that particular area until you are in a more current version of the software. So Tony mentioned really thinking about your approach to those being less peak and valley and more of an even keel in terms of the cost and the efforts that goes into those upgrades, because they can be very chunky and very time consuming. So consider working with vendors that can help you level that off. And approaching your cloud journey, you may not be on the cloud journey yet. It might be something that is you know, something well ahead of where your firm is considering right now. But as you think about new technologies, keep that in mind, because it might be the eventual outcome for most of us. And having that forethought as you plan is really an important role of the technology team, and making sure that you have versions that make it less abrasive and abrupt when you change to a cloud vendor or to a cloud solution. Having the later technologies, or having technologies that will allow that transition to be less painful or more seamless is a really good way to smooth the path. And then Tony also mentioned removing customizations, and partner with somebody who is deep in those technology areas can help you find potentially an alternate way of doing what that customization was providing you. Many of you we know have built that customization because you absolutely need it. It's something that the business requires. So now with the enhancements that have been added to many technologies, there may be a very valid and suitable solution that is part of the core software and doesn't require a customization, or potentially there's a process change that can happen if you're thinking more towards using the standard approach of the software rather than a customized version. And find the tools that keep you proactively informed. Nobody likes waking up to surprises in the morning with, data issues, integrations that didn't complete their task, and therefore potentially your time didn't load into your finance system, or maybe you had a list of matters from your intake system that were supposed to be posted into your finance system or into a DMS, and that didn't happen. And now you've got people looking for it, and it's very visible to the firm. If you know about those things straight away and before they affect the business, you'll be a hero, an unsung hero maybe, but you'll be a hero nonetheless. There are methods for tracking all of that and making sure that you can address those issues before they become too large, or maybe before they're even noticed by anybody. And finally, we're all about partnering with tech support firms that can help you achieve your firm's strategy, whether it is a cloud journey, whether it's an upgrade, whether it is business process improvement, or helping your end users be a bit more self-sufficient and better trained on the software that they use. Thinking about your customizations and where you could maybe cut those down and potentially use a native solution that would allow you to, one, remove a costly to own custom solution, and one that wouldn't port necessarily into the cloud. Those are the things that we really hope that today you can give some thought to, and we at Pinnacle are all about this every day. So if there is anything at any time that we can help you with, there in the next slide, you'll see some contact information for Tony, Gareth, and myself, as well as a general info button, email for reaching out to Pinnacle. We work with the largest and the smallest firms in the world. We're happy to talk about what your challenges are and potentially find you a good solution. So thank you very much for joining us today. We have a couple of, there was really just one question in the chat about the AI solution, which I think Tony addressed. But if there are other questions, please get them into the chat and we'd be happy to answer them.
I think just adding to the answer as well, that we're doing a lot of quite interesting stuff around AI and the connectivity into Teams and Microsoft technology as well, which I'm really happy to talk to you a lot more about. And that's almost stemming from needs within some companies where they want to take fee earners, attorneys away from the front end of finance systems, different systems, and we're finding really smart ways of delivering that through things like Microsoft Teams, etc. And there's a lot of AI built into that, and I'd be really happy to talk more about that because we've got a lot of people with different systems, but we're doing some quite cool stuff there, which I'd be really happy to talk about.
Also within our own software within Pitch Perfect, we've developed some AI tools that are pretty interesting. I think Gareth is probably a bit more lyrical around those than I am, so I'll let him.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Val. So yeah, basically we've got using the latest Microsoft AI, we've got the ability to go into documents that have been previously responded to and then suggest answers to documents that look similar. So typically this would be around things, RFI, RFP documents that you're having to reply to some of the great use cases around things like all of the data security stuff that is very repetitive, but very time consuming. We've got tools that will just go straight in and say, right, I think I've seen this question before. Here's an answer. And it gives you a confidence score. You can go in either amend the answer or accept the answer. And if you amend it, then it learns more. So next time when it sees it, it will suggest the amended answer versus the previous one, etc. So like a lot of these AI and machine learning tools, the more you use it, the more accurate it becomes quite quickly.